All right. Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? Wednesday afternoon. How's everybody doing?
Is that to us or
Yeah, that's to you.
we're all great. We're
Excellent.
rock and roll on routing.
Awesome. Okay. I was checking to see if folks are trickling into the session, and they are, so that is our green light to get started. So thank you everyone for making time to come to our customer office hours today. We have a very exciting topic in routing, exciting especially for all the RevOps nerds in the world. Before we get into that though, I wanted to start with a quick round of introductions so you can get to know the people that we've got here on the call to share their expertise and insights into this topic. So I'm Ashley Kim, Customer Education. I will pass it over to Heather, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Heather. I've been at Fullcast maybe just shy of 2 years now. And prior to that was also a Fullcast customer and got to use routing specifically day to day to solve customer problems. Now I get to help our customers do it, working on the implementation and product specialist side.
Awesome. Lisa.
Hi guys, my name's Lisa Tejan. I've got several full cast years under my belt in all few different capacities. But now I manage our customer success team here at Fullcast. And I've gotten to hear and see all sorts of fun routing stories and scenarios. So maybe I'll get to share a couple. We'll see.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. And Tyler.
Hello, everybody. Tyler, Director of Product for our plan product, which includes routing. Been with Fullcast for quite some time. And Heather and I used to work together in the sense that I was the CSM helping Heather out at her previous company. So uh,
That's right. You taught me routing like twice now, so.
I love
The gift that doesn't stop, keeps on giving,
it.
routing. Awesome. Okay, thank you all for that. I'm gonna do a quick set of slides just to kind of orient us to the topic and the structure of what we're gonna be covering today. So bear with me here. Okay. So first things first, our topic, territory-driven routing. We wanted to, just from the get-go, kind of emphasize, right, that with territory planning being central to most of our plan customers' primary or initial entry point, the territory-driven part is the huge value prop here. You've already done work in territories, and so we wanted to really emphasize that aspect of our routing offering. For today's session, what we're going to do is go through the topics in this order. So first, kind of talking about territory coverage and territory rules as the driver for the routing logic. And then we'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of things, what the routing policy actually is, and how Salesforce connects to that and plays into the way that it executes. We'll look at account routing. We have a couple of different trigger scenarios we'll walk through. We'll look at lead routing and then also opportunity routing as well. For the format today, I have, like I said, just a few slides. We'll also do a screen share of Fullcast as well as Salesforce to give that visual context for folks to connect with as we talk through the scenarios. The Q&A box is open. Our dear Lisa will do her best to keep an eye on that, and she will, maybe answer questions typing, but also just lob them out to the team as they come up. So feel free to drop questions there at any point in time. I also like to save time at the end for Q&A if there's parting thoughts and so forth. So that'll be an option as well. And then we will send the recording as well as a link to like a summary article and the deck as well tomorrow. All right. So the big idea, I'm going to hand it over to our director of product, Tyler Simons, and been at Fullcast for quite some time to tell us about this nugget.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So man, I like to go all the way back and just think about the old school days and before Fullcast was even Fullcast and we were still building this product. And what we were doing is we were kind of building all this routing stuff out in Salesforce. And the hardest part about all of that was that we were essentially already taking a bunch of go-to-market rules that somebody had done either in a spreadsheet or another tool, and then rebuilding them again, spending more time doing that in Salesforce. Um, and Then what would inevitably end up happening is that you would change a go-to-market rule or somebody would leave the business, and all of this stuff happens in your territory plan, and then we would get a ticket, and then 2 or 3 days later, we would have to update those rules or update the coverage. And it just kind of creates this lag between what is actually happening from an execution standpoint and what is actually also happening in your routing. And I think that really, when we rolled out our territory planning module and then we started work on the routing piece, that was going to be the key for us is let's not have you ever think about routing because routing is going to be so tightly integrated into the territory planning tool that when you make the changes in territories, routing will just follow along and it'll essentially already be up to date. Um, so that's kind of the biggest piece, right? You're no longer with us having to redo any kind of routing rules because if you go update a coverage, so somebody leaves the business or is promoted, routing is looking at those territories and will look immediately at what the changes are. Even if future dated, somebody's leaving in 2 weeks. On that day in 2 weeks, you don't need to remember to go update your routing rule. You'll just go, or the system will know, hey, let's go now route it to Heather instead of Lisa or whatever that might be.
Awesome. I guess on that note, is there anything, Heather, in your previous experience, that's a pain point that maybe you wanted to add on, or Lisa, anything that when you've worked with customers, you've heard them really emphasize about this? I think I was looking to see who's on the call, and I think you've probably felt the pain, but I was curious if you had any anecdotes to share before we move to the next.
I immediately thought of some. As soon as Tyler said, I like to think back to before Fullcast had routing. And I don't like that actually. And it reminded me of a world before Fullcast routing. And this was a little while ago, a long, long time ago, using, hacked assignment rules and having to come up with weird Salesforce workarounds to force round robining. And again, to Tyler's point, then the sales leader's coming to me every other day saying, well, so and so isn't going to take these anymore. You have to change who's in the order. And I want proof that it's actually taking turns. And it just made me want to throw up my hands. And all of that being managed where you're already managing your account territories and the logic behind those, so much simpler.
There, I don't know if Lisa, if you have anything, but I have an anecdote.
Go right ahead. I'll let you, Tyler. But I do want to just mention Troy's comment is absolutely true. And I have witnessed way too many examples of people trying to utilize a separate routing system and then planning their territories in a different manner. And trying to merge those two worlds has just always been a pain. And you're duplicating work, as Troy has said. So it's just silly. But yes, Tyler, share your anecdote, please.
What is
Yeah, there's also a lag, right? Even if you get them exactly the same, you can't update routing the same day that things happen. So there's all these challenges. We had a customer in the past that, and this is like if every customer could be this way, this is the exact promise that routing has to offer. And it's not always this way, but like for this customer, when we set up their territories and their routing, they didn't have to, and this is kind of this linkage, right, between routing, looking at your territories. They didn't have to touch their routing in over a year. The rules were configured, the policies were there, the policies were looking at the coverage in the territories, and they didn't touch a single thing with routing. They had a ton of changes. By all means, if people left the business, the people were promoted, they hired new people, they made new territories. All of that stuff is still happening, but routing didn't get touched in over a year. And so they had to come back to me when I was still in the CSM world and be like, how is our routing working? Because they forgot. They didn't know because they didn't have to touch any of the routing for over a year, and we had to like unpack that, right? And that is like truly like the best thing to hear is I totally forgot how this thing is working because it's been working for such a long time that we haven't had to touch it. And I think that that is like the ultimate anecdote in terms of why you would go with routing is to just set it and forget it. So
The ultimate set and forget it for a year? That's great.
yeah. What was
Um,
that? What was that kitchen tool that was that set it and forget it? I forgot it. Does anybody remember?
I don't
It's
know.
not a it's
Work-
not the George Foreman thing, is it? I don't know. Anyway, I have to look that up.
Yeah. Um, awesome. So thank you all for that. I think it's helpful to set the context here. Um, the next one here, I wanted to kind of unpack this term routing policy. We use the term policy, and I know that different organizations, company, RevOps, schools of thought, let's say, may use the word policy differently. So I wanted to kind of talk about what we mean when we say a policy. And so there's three kind of buckets of key points that I've got here to highlight. One is that your policy requires a trigger. And I'll let our team kind of unpack that. And then also that what we're doing from a territory like account team piece where you have your territory coverage assignments and you do a scheduled, typically nightly export is not the same as having a routing policy. And we kind of want to talk about what those differences are for folks who may not yet have routing and they're kind of considering what the differences are. And then just a quick rundown of the common policy types that we have. Again, I should also say we're focusing on routing, which is one bucket of policies, and there are other automations as well that we have to I use the word automate again, but use your territory structure and rules to achieve certain outcomes. So I wanted to highlight that as well. I suppose, is there, to start with the trigger piece, what would you all highlight here? And if it makes sense, I'm happy to go ahead and show the flow, if that makes sense, or we can hold off until we're more in the details of the policies itself. Maybe I'll just
I think all three of these kind of make sense together too. So I'll even just start with this. We're talking about point number 2, where you've said this is separate from like your scheduled export that's already happening. Probably, I think most common we see like a nightly job, right? If you're looking at that and then you're looking at number 3 and you're seeing one of the most common types is an account, but I'm already doing that in my nightly exports, that almost by itself tells you what the policy is. It's the real time change that is being powered by your territory structure and all the work to the points we made earlier that you've already put in. It's what's happening real time, which brings me to point 1, which is when. What real time would we need that to happen? And your business needs are going to declare that, right? Do I need it to happen when a certain thing happens on an account? When a lead first comes in or when it gets marketing qualified, right? What are the actual triggers that say, now I need this to real time route somewhere to someone?
Awesome. Any other thoughts on that? Does it feel, because I'm reminding myself of the upcoming slides that I have. And the next slide that I have kind of outlines the specific routing scenarios. So I think maybe it makes sense to just kind of look at the flow, not in great depth at this point, but just to kind of help people understand how we're dealing with this trigger piece, which Heather, you kind of hinted at, right? What are the things that need to change? Let me go ahead and drag that over. Look, I don't think my screen can handle this. So I think I'm not the flow architect. I will say a general statement and hope somebody grabs it. We have separate flows for each account, lead, and opportunity. And I think this is a best practice. Heather, could you tell us more?
Yeah, and probably every Salesforce org is always different, but a really common best practice amongst admins and architects in Salesforce is you don't want 5 different flows on the same record that serve the same purpose. Rather, the way flows work well is if you say, I'm going to want routing to happen on an account sometimes. That is a use case for one flow, and then the which times can be managed. You'll see there's a decision element there. So instead of this, every time an account updates is triggering potentially 5 different flows, instead it can trigger one flow and then just go down the appropriate path based on the change that happened. Do I need, routing to happen because there's been a change in firmographics? Do I need routing to happen because this prospect became a customer and maybe now what we need to do is assign the appropriate CSM? What is it that happened on the account? And each path can appropriately route based on that, but it's all managed in one flow, which is much easier maintenance-wise for all you Salesforce admins out there.
Awesome.
Piggyback on a little bit of what Heather said there, especially when we think about the triggers, because when you do want to maintain all of your routing scenarios in a singular flow for a specific object, so accounts, for example, that trigger, you sometimes might need to make it broader and then allow for your decision trees to actually narrow down the scope again to get to the correct routing scenarios. So that's just something to keep in mind, that if you are accounting for different scenarios in a decision tree, you have to account for all of those all of those scenarios in your initial trigger as well.
Two other points on my side. Why did we use a flow, right? Because I think you'll see a lot of tools out there that don't require you to build flows. And instead, what they do when you install their managed package is they have an apex trigger on each of the objects. And the challenge with that is that apex trigger fires all the time. Every single edit on that specific object on those records, it fires. Fires, it fires, it fires. And then it will go and send it out and say, okay, does this actually need to be routed or not? Great. But for a flow, because it's native Salesforce functionality and the way that it is built, when you set that entry criteria at the very top, you can be really lightweight with all of the edits that happen against a record. And that's really critical with older Salesforce orgs that have been around a long time, that have lots of automation piled on top of your account object or your lead object. And so us trying to be as lightweight as possible in routing and kind of be this like, let's take a back seat unless we actually need to route is really important for a lot of orgs to avoid all of the SOQL query limits and CPU timeouts and all the fun stuff that Salesforce loves to put on us. So that is why we chose the flow, because you can be really prescriptive around when do you want to run routing and when do you not want to run routing. The other thing I'll just call out is that doing the tree decision logic down in the bottom is not necessarily this is one way to do it in the flow, right? You can build a routing decision tree if you're very good at flow. This has got a nice like layout, but we also have a tagging logic where you can build, and I think there's a customer with maybe 12 variables of data that they send in. And that routing or the tagging logic will allow you to kind of go away from what you see here. And it essentially says, fire the routing on the account. Here's all the data, Fullcast. You go figure out the decision logic, right? And Fullcast will go do that. So one way or another, if you like the control over exactly when to run things, then you'll see people kind of tend towards this, especially those that are really good at flows. For those that kind of just want to say, here's the data, prioritize how you see fit and go do the routing, then the tagging logic is really nice. And that keeps the flow really simple and you really not needing to change or edit the flow on a regular basis. Because I know that that is scary to some people in the sense that, well, business systems or IT owns it, and their backlog or their queue is 4 weeks, 6 weeks to make changes to a flow. And really, if we get in there, we want to be one and done with the flow. And then and at some point, we'll look at the UI of Fullcast. You'll be able to edit all of those policies yourself from a RevOps person. You don't need to get in and edit flows and things like that. So different ways to handle it. So don't just feel like, hey, this is the only way that we can do this, but this does look nice and pretty.
Call outs. Okay. So I think we've kind of covered this one. I think it probably goes out without saying, but the thing here, it's not the same because it fires every time. You guys all kind of basically know that. Okay, there we go. Or in real time, I should say. So what we're going to show today, 3 different routing policy types: account routing, lead routing, and opportunity routing. Some of these things I think I may have tweaked a little bit, so we'll see. But I think what I wanted to do before we get into the weeds just kind of talk about these buckets and then we'll look at it. So talking about account routing first, we have 3 example scenarios here, and I'm hoping the team can give a little bit more context and color on what you've seen actually out in the world for use cases or reasons behind having any of these. So the 3 examples that we have are, we have an employee count change that would take something, let's say, for example, from an SMB to a mid-market. We have a flip from an account that is a customer, or sorry, a prospect that becomes a customer. And then we have this idea of like a holding pen where, for example, accounts may be in unassigned for one reason or another, and then something changes such as like engagement, and that puts the account, gives an assignment to the account. So before moving on to the other types, I'd love for us to kind of share our thoughts on each of these scenarios, why they matter, etc.
Specifically, when we look at account routing, again, at that point, what we're figuring out is what is going to need this account to be routed right now versus overnight, right? So I think of scenarios, probably one of the most common ones that I see customers implementing is the prospect to customer flip. So common, right? They've just become a customer and I need to get the CSM engaged today. I don't want to wait for the overnight to figure out who that is. I need to be able to route today. Another one I've seen is, depending on how accounts are managed, maybe, your BDRs or your SDRs are managing accounts up to a certain stage, and then it's time to engage an AE. When you reach that time, that's the time to route to an AE. And I've even seen people have that triggered by a button or a checkbox that the BDR can select and say, all right, let's figure out who the account executive is that I'm going to be engaging, so we can get this into their hands real time.
Pause for an awkward silence. I'm gonna I'm gonna show Fullcast now, because let's not delay the magic. So I'm trying to see who's here, and I think most of our folks have gotten amount of proficiency, but just in case people are watching this after the fact, I want to just do a quick little where the heck are we thing. So if you've already been here, just take a sip of water or something. So we're in Fullcast, right? We're looking at our home screen here where we have our territory structure, which most of our folks are probably familiar with, as that's their entry point, but all of the policies live here in this tile. So when I go into manage policies by territory, quick orientation to what this looks like, you'll notice that we have the territory hierarchy here on the left. And then we have the full list of policies that populates here after it kind of checks the Salesforce world, where you can see, we've got assignment-based policies, sales process, which we talked about, and other categories as well. I think without laboring it, I think it's probably helpful for folks to understand this interaction between, we're building policies, but we're also associating them with a level of the hierarchy, and then we're also doing this tag bit. If it makes sense, shall I open an example policy and let you all kind of talk through that layout and how it works?
Open up the Firmographic one.
Yes.
Because that's probably the most often used case. Data updates in Salesforce, go find the right territory, right? Like, this is a very popular one for us. So Heather, you can walk us through it.
Okay. Got followed.
I think the other thing too, right? Like, if talking about the structure, because one thing for me, I'm gonna be the first person to say we know what my job is, and I try to educate people, which means I have to try to educate myself. And I'm not smart as these people, so it's hard for me. And I think one of the things that's always been hard for me to grasp is like, we're like building policies at certain levels, and the things go in order. How would you break that down?
I have a customer anecdote if you'd like to hear a little bit about this. Okay.
Love, yes.
So guys, when we are creating these routing policies, and Ashley, if you can go back to policies so that we're not overwhelmed with what's all in a policy really quickly, it'll also let us see where things are built. So it looks like pretty much all of these are built almost at all companies, but will you open Namer for me? There's one built at Namer on the left-hand. So go ahead and click on Namer on the left-hand side for me. So when that is selected, because there are only certain policies that are created in the lower levels, now you can only see where that level is selected and lower the policies that exist. Now, why this is important, now you have another one that's actually on the enterprise level. So if you click on enterprise, you're going to drop down and only see the one. The anecdote that I recently had a customer situation with is they did something similar to this, where they had built a certain routing scenario policy on a lower level node, such as this. Now, this isn't the lowest. In their example, they were almost all the way towards the bottom. However, they had it in place where they wanted it to utilize the territory routing, and the system will always try to find that lowest policy that it can get to. However, they had a broken rule. They had the parent node without a rule before getting down to the child node where the policy was built. That's a problem because as the system is evaluating through your territory rules to figure out the lowest policy it can get to, it hits a break where it doesn't have any more rules for it to actually be able to evaluate to get to that lowest level policy. So where you build your policies is very important in conjunction with how your territory rules are set up. If you have rules through the entire tree all the way down, you can build them wherever you want pretty much, though there are some best practices and we'll talk through some of that. However, if you have a broken rule, building something lower, it's never going to actually be able to evaluate down to that policy to match to it. So
Generally speaking, it makes sense to put the policy at the highest level for which it would make sense for the scenario, because if something does get all the way down to the lowest level and start looking for policies there and there isn't one that matches, it's just going to follow the hierarchy right back up to find the first policy where the tag string does match, and then it can use those. So going up a level higher is usually still going to make sense as long as it still makes sense for the accounts that you want to match to that policy.
That's a lot. So
That is.
Yes. And I think too, I don't know, I think we've talked about it, but just for the record also, this is fueled by our regular territory rules, right? So that's the first part. Shall we open this? Shall we open this guy here and
let's
look
open
at
it up, but let's go back to the policy at the top, that all companies Firmographic one. And I want to talk through that, like the process step. If it was linear, it's the top one there.
Yeah, but that's not enterprise, but
Oh, it's the enterprise one. That's fine. Whatever. Okay. This is two enterprise.
This is the one that I think, yeah, it doesn't matter. Same thing.
So this is on enterprise, right?
Yeah.
It is.
Like
but
the way you can think about this is that flow that we looked at earlier, fires. We send a bunch of firmographic information that you use on the left-hand side of territories to build your territories. So we map that data from Salesforce into Fullcast and say, okay, account, you have updated data or whatever it is, where in the rule structure, in your territory structure on the left, would you belong if we were to essentially rerun the rules on you from a Fullcast standpoint? If you logged into Fullcast and hit rerun rules, where would that account, or honestly, if you're routing leads belong based on the data that you're pulling from Salesforce? So we kind of send that stuff over. So that's the first thing that we do. And that's just kind of what Heather was getting into, is that you're going to go all the way down into that enterprise node. So you are located in California, which means you're in the Namer region. And Ashley, if you will, you can kind of like open those things up at the same time. And you have 10,000 employees, and you're in California, so you're in Enterprise West. And now we're looking at a smart plan, which might be is kind of a round robin-esque type of thing. So we would say, oh, great, this is going to belong to Enterprise West. That's the first thing we do. We don't even look for policies yet. We do that.
Mm-hmm.
Then, because we're there, we go, is there a matching policy? I'm not going to get into the tag stuff, but we'll just say, is there a matching policy? If there's not, then to Heather's point, we go up one. And we go to enterprise and say, is there a matching policy there? And maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And so as you kind of move up the hierarchy until you find that matching policy, once you do that, we then evaluate all those policy rules. And so you really are only going to build out all the complex different things at different levels. So you might do the enterprise policy if you have different rules at enterprise than you would at all companies or at Namer. And the more you can kind of abstract up through your hierarchy where the rules are the same, the less policies you have to manage. And this will really become important. And this is really for me when I'm like working with customers, what I'm thinking about is, and if you open up the role-based routing now,
Yeah, when we say where the rules are the same, it's this, where the stuff that you want to happen when it routes, where that's the same, go ahead and set it at a higher level if for all of the accounts you're going to do the same thing with them.
exactly. And we, I know this isn't the policy for this. Keep that role-based stuff open. But we talked about I think Heather, you talked about the when it flips to a customer.
Yeah.
This is the perfect scenario in which maybe you're going to try to go find the CSM assigned to a territory, right? And so if you change that to a CSM or whatever we have in here, there it is. It's kind of like 5 down. Yeah. So select that. Go ahead. So if we were to save this, what this says, if this was at the all companies, that says anytime that you flip from a prospect to a customer, we're going to fire that flow. We're going to send in the data. We're going to match to this policy, and we're going to go find the CSM assigned to the territory. That might be Enterprise West, right? Because we found that earlier. And we're going to assign that CSM. And so that is one policy that can exist for your entire go-to-market. And this is really when we're talking about that customer anecdote, this is what was set up. So you don't need to change any round robins. You don't need to do anything because we're just looking at the people assigned to specific roles in the territory. Hopefully that maybe I made it more confusing. I don't know. So like it's a lot of like we do a lot of logic to figure out what's happening with that territory structure. And we handle a lot of that for you and it kind of is a little bit to unpack, but yeah.
It's one of the first sticking points when deciding, what policies to make. It's really where am I putting them? So I'm glad we started there because that tends to be one of the first decisions to make.
Yeah. All right. What's next, Ashley?
What's next is I think if we want to, so we talked about prospect to customer. I'm guessing that's very obvious to people. We talked about the employee count one, the holding pen scenario for account routing. Is there anything specific you all would talk about that use case? We can look at the policy here as well. The thing about the policies is they all kind of look similar because there's, in this example, and maybe this is a good question. In this example, we did a lot of work over in our flow, right? But then also the policy operation tag is doing some of this too, right? To let us know, okay, there's this holding pin thing. So maybe if you guys want to talk about how someone could execute this and why, and any specifics you'd call out in the actual way that we call these policy stages, by the way, the way that the stages are configured. We can do that one before we move on to lead routing. There's a holding.
I can go. Heather, unless you want to go.
I'm going to volunteer you.
Thank you.
We'll just take turns like telling the first person to just dole it out. Yeah, I'm Tyler. I'm sure you have something great to say about this.
I always do. This is me. All right. So the first one we talked about it actually. That's go find the territory, right? Not much else we need to discuss. Duplicate processing, if we want to find duplicates, you can open these up as we kind of talk through this, right? So if you want to go look for duplicate accounts and things like this, for me, my recommendation more often than not is to not deal with this in routing and deal with it upstream. So you'll actually usually see me trying to avoid doing this because from a data quality standpoint, I want to handle that upstream using other tools and stuff like that. This is here. If you have a really bad duplicate problem, then you can use this to try and get the 40 accentures to the right person. So then you can go into role-based routing, right? For the holding pen, I think the way that you set this up was just like, hey, go do this round robin. But if you did have like a specific account executive you wanted to assign it to, then great, you can do it that way with the role-based routing. But let's go, yep. And then the final one here is the round robin settings. So, and Lisa kind of had messaged me on the side around bringing this up around the smart plan, and I think it's worthy to discuss at this point. Uh, the round robin setting, or sorry, the round robin, yeah, the round robin settings here. Essentially, when you can't do a role-based routing, you can't find the right person. One of those might be or is smart plan. Smart plan uses a bunch of cool balancing logic to figure out your territories, and the routing isn't going to call into the smart plan to figure that out for you. And a lot of that is because we think that, if you have some person that does not have enough um, enough book of business or enough accounts in the smart plan world, we'll just keep routing accounts or leads to that person, and then they'll be inundated. And so the right approach there is that you've set your smart plan, you've set your territories, and thus anything net new coming in should be fair and equal, which is through the round robin setting. Now, there's all kinds of different reasons of maybe why you might want to still use the smart plan stuff, and there's like CSM reasons and stuff. And so we can still run that logic through smart plan via the import and export. But the routing needs to use the round robin when you're at a smart plan. And so we can do this a couple of different ways, right? You can bring in the territories as we see here. So up at the top there, we've got APAC, EMEA, LATAM, and NAMER. Typically, what I would actually see is not necessarily at this high level, but we might do the Enterprise West team, and that will actually bring in 1 through 5. And so you don't need to go all the way down there, Ashley, but if we click away, if we did bring in West 1 through 5 into the round robin here, and they're actually there. Look at that. Woo, cool. Um, but who are we routing it to? We're routing it to these territories. And this goes back to, I don't want you to ever have to touch routing, ever. I don't want you to have to. So what we're doing, and there's a drop down just underneath that to say go route it to the account executive. So what we do is we round robin to the territory, West, then West 1, West 2, West 3, so on and so forth. And we go see who the AE is assigned. If you overcarved, let's say West 5 has a TBH in it, because you've overcarved that, you're going to hire that later in the year, we'll skip it. And we'll move on back to 1. And so this allows you to deal with the dynamic changes of people coming in and out of territories and maintaining a round robin status, particularly for those smart plan pieces. I think this is kind of like when we think about smart plan or any of these holding pens, which I guess I'll bring that full circle with the holding pens. A lot of times you have, maybe you have 3 million accounts in your Salesforce instance. And you know that no one on this face of the planet can work all 3 million accounts in a given quarter. And so you've maybe only assigned 100 to your reps. So you have a lot of accounts sitting in a holding pen, but you don't want them to be forgotten about in case you get maybe someone downloads a white paper or says, I want a demo. You need to route that account or that lead to a person as fast as possible because you have somebody that is interested and it's in the holding pen. And this is kind of where this comes in, is that, you know what, rep in Enterprise West 1, I want you to work these 100 accounts. This is what you're outbounding to, you're focused on. But if something does come inbound, we will round robin it and you will get those, right? And that's kind of what's happening here, is we've set this up to make sure that anytime anything inbound that's not already assigned to you comes in, you'll get a chance at that through the round robin.
Okay, I think we've talked a lot about account routing. Shall we move to lead routing? Yes, good, good. Okay, lead
Routing
routing,
doesn't change much.
huh?
So lead routing doesn't change a ton.
That's true. That's true.
Just introduces a couple of things, right?
Yes, right. And I
So
think like the there's maybe some nuance we could talk about around like this one, for example. I think when we were preparing Tyler, we were talking about if we were to say textbook best practice, whatever the case may be, that routing leads twice can be a good idea, something we say is a best practice. So if we wanted to unpack that a little bit from like a business process perspective, we could talk about that. And then I think inbound, this round robin thing is not so different from what we were talking about with that account holding pin situation, just the idea that we can leverage round robins and we can define what
yeah.
these tools are. So yeah, so anything before you look at the policy you want to talk about with respect to the first one, I suppose, Tyler?
Yeah, the routing leads twice. I don't know that I would call it a best practice, but it could be a best practice. And it really has to do with data quality for me. So what is it, what do we mean by that, right? So what is the lead object in Salesforce in the first place? And everyone has different definitions of that, but if you come and call up Tyler and ask him what's your definition of the lead object and what does that mean? We have a bunch of stuff that happens on the marketing side of the house, right? There's a bunch of things that go on in inbound. There's people downloading things, putting in fake emails and real numbers, and they're saying I want a demo request, but give you a fake email. There's all kinds of stuff happening, right? But you need to do something with that. You need to have somebody follow up on that. And I get it, we're in this AI world and things are changing, but like still somebody needs to validate whether this person is real or not. And that is kind of what this lead object is about. Because you have contacts in Salesforce. Could you imagine creating a contact directly from everybody that downloaded a white paper? Your system would be just mind blown in terms of just the amount of junk contact data that exists. And that is this half step for the lead object, for me at least, right? Everything that comes inbound that you don't know is a real person or not goes into the lead object. And then you have your BDR agent or your BDR human working those things to figure out, is this a real person or not? And are they engaged? Are they interested? So that's phase one. Lead hit enters, lead enters the lead object gets created, gets routed to a BDR or SDR or XDR or MDR. Can't think of any other DRs. Am I forgetting one? There's got to be more out there. Come on, people.
Did you say ADR?
Oh, ADR. Yes. All right. I love it. So the it's my favorite part about development representatives is the first letter. So that's the first route that you're going to happen, and then they're going to be working it. They get a response, they get on a call, whatever that might be. They've validated that this is a real person, they have interest, and they're ready for an account executive. And so option one would be let's convert that into an account, a contact, an opportunity because they're going to buy tomorrow, right? They're ready to go. Credit card is here. Only to find out when the AE tries to schedule something, they never respond again. uh, so I'm just responding to a comment from
For the record, we have a rogue audience member who's doing chats just to the panelists.
great. And so you come to find out they never join a call. They never pop in, or they're not actually real. Their credit card is fake, whatever that might be. And so an AE has spent a bunch of time working this with an opportunity. Now it's sitting in the system as a contact. It actually wasn't real in the first place. And so what you could do is put that gate further up in the sense that you route the lead to the AE. It remains a lead until the AE is able to meet with the person and validate that it is actually an opportunity. And this is really like, to this point, is up to the business, and you have to know what your sales process is like and what does that handoff look like between the BDR and the AEs. Because if it is later stage, then this isn't really a best practice to route the lead twice. But if it is earlier stage and you have to be that backstop with the AEs, then yeah, this is a best practice in the sense that we want to do this. And so routing that lead again to the AE is totally possible using our routing logic, and that's kind of why we called that out.
Perfect.
But we're gonna go look at the policy because I want to talk about BMA stuff, which is
Yeah.
another three-letter acronym.
I think it's this one.
Because that's really the only thing different, right? We introduce this whole notion of BMA. What does that stand for? Best matched account. Because leads are junk, and we don't want them to be contacts yet. Salesforce did something smart and not connect them to, maybe not smart, I don't know, did not connect them to an account. Now I'm thinking about it, they should still just connect them to an account. Anyway, so they're not connected to the account. They're not related in any way. When you think about a contact, when you go to a contact in Salesforce, you can always see that account there, right? This person belongs to Accenture or Fullcast or whatever it is. But in the lead world, that doesn't happen. It's just a string field with the company name. And so, but in order to actually route this correctly, if there's an account that's already existing and you want to get it to the account executive or the strategic rep or the CSM, and skipping all of the BDR and all the SDR stuff, you need to figure out, is there an actual account that exists in the system in the first place? And because Salesforce doesn't do that for us, we use the best master account logic. And so that does a bunch of matching rules and things that you can build out. You can customize that in Salesforce. I don't think that we'll have time today, nor is it planned. But what ends up happening is that the first thing that you do, or that our routing does, is when that lead gets created, we look for that best matched account based on the rules that you build out. If we find that best matched account, in the case of Accenture, then we stamp that account in a BMA field of your choosing. You get to create it and you do all the mapping. And so then it becomes that lookup field, and you have leads related to accounts. And we can then leverage that in the lead routing to say, well, when we do have a best matched account, instead of looking at the territories on our left-hand side, I want you to go look at the account team that we matched to and go route it to whatever role, AE, BDR, so on and so forth. That's really all that's changed between the two.
We did get a good call out here, and I'm looking at time, and it may be the best time, if there is one, to kind of talk about, I'll take this as a question actually. How can we see in Salesforce the way to audit this, what's happening, right? Because we have leads, accounts, what is the other one? Opportunities, things that are moving, right? We're moving things in Salesforce. So I'm thinking maybe I go ahead and show an example of a policy status so that we can kind of just show what information you'll be able to see from the Salesforce side to kind of track the movement of these things. All in favor?
Hi.
Good. I'm democratic about things. All right. So this is not the right one. Get out of here. Finish on my choice. This is a more rich one, shall we say. So this one, actually, I think I pulled over an account routing one, but I think the structure here overall is the same, where we have like this record, right? Our Fullcast policy status. I'm not going to talk about this too much. I'm just going to tee somebody up. There's sections here, input, process, and output, that kind of show how the things are processing and in what order. And yeah, Heather looks like she really wants to talk a little bit about policy statuses.
Yeah, I love these. And I think I made the comment whoa, way back at the beginning where one of the things that I used to field as an ops person long before I had a full cast was, my dear John David, sales leader, would come to me and say, I just don't believe that round robin is distributing equally. I do not believe it. I have no way of seeing. And this was, of course, back with my very hacky way of tricking Salesforce into round robining. With each policy status, it is a really clear snapshot in time. Exactly when did this trigger to try to route with Fullcast? What were all of the inputs at that time, right? Which is nice because your account history or your tracking may not always show what those fields were at this time, but this will. All of the inputs that were used so that we can figure out what territory did it match to, therefore, which policy did it find, and then when it found that policy, exactly what steps were taken and what were the outcomes. I love that we have this. And then, my dear John David, I would have been able to open up a summary of these and say, see, it's taking turns between all these new owners, right? It really is doing it. But it's just phenomenal for auditing. And it's translating the long, JSON that's really saying the exact inputs from the transaction and putting it where we can read very clearly, step by step, exactly the thought process that happened when this one record was routed.
Well said. Tyler or Lisa, anything you would add to this? I'll say 5 minutes at the end to kind of do a quick walkthrough of some of the documentation that we have. We do have a pretty detailed document about the policy status and all of the things that you'll see on the page here. So I don't think it's the most exciting use of time to go through this step by step. But as far as context or implications of this, Tyler or Lisa, anything you'd add before I flip back over?
No.
I think the only thing that I would add is just that when you are asked, why did this route the way it did, the territory routing input on the left is your roadmap for solving that equation essentially. And you have the data inputs, and many times start at the top of your rules, work your way through to figure out where would this data point in this rule drop it, and follow it all the way down to figure out how it got to the routing policy. So that can be somewhat of a helpful just knowledge activity, is that is essentially your roadmap of understanding how it territory routed.
Perfect. Okay, so flipping back over here, we've talked about lead routing, things that are different. I think we get it, right? We're routing leads as if they were accounts to kind of be consistent with our structure of our territory. So the last one here, opportunity routing, we've got, obviously there's a ton of use cases here, but the ones that we've built out to talk about as examples are a round robin for sales engineers, where if a deal hits a certain threshold, I think in the example we built, it was something like the deal value was over a certain dollar amount. That was our cue to assign a sales engineer to the opportunity. And then we also have the opportunity round robining CSS. I think that might not be what I was supposed to put in there.
No, that's great. You could do it this way.
I don't remember this. Yeah.
And I
renewals maybe.
But for example, maybe you don't want to wait until it actually flips to customer. Maybe you don't trust that process. I've seen that.
Well, or more than not trusting that process, in the customer success world, it is very, very helpful to have a customer success manager engaged with the account even before the sale closes, to start building that relationship and gaining that context of that, company, their use cases, what they're looking to achieve. And so you can have it triggered on your opportunities to actually round robin the CSM so that assignment happens before the opportunity ever gets closed, meaning that you can get that CSM involved early.
That's right. I looked at my notes. You guys remember without even having my notes.
I mean, that's a use case that directly impacts me and my team. So if I didn't know how that functioned, I would be probably a horrible CS leader.
Well, now you've saved yourself for today. So I think we'll open this up. I think the thing we'll see that these policies all the insides of them are all very similar, with a few differences in terms of stages that may be there or may not be there. So when we look at this, we're seeing, I think this is one of the things that makes me excited. So I'll just keep chittering until somebody stops me. But I think it's really exciting to highlight that we're looking at our territory structure, but the really fun thing about this policy specifically is that it gives us a chance to leverage our team structure. And so we have a team over in the teams module where all of our sales engineers live. And so we've selected this team of sales engineers. And so now we have 3 sales engineers, and we're ensuring that once our opportunity qualifies, meeting whatever that dollar value is, we're just going to round robin across the three sales engineers. So actually, none of this matters, but here we're making sure that this is the conditions to get those SEs on the account team. And I think that's, or the opportunity team, I think that's super fun because it shows a little bit more nuance than like you're just going one-to-one or something like that. It's just adding more dimension. And that's why I like this one. Anything else anyone would add about this?
About opportunity routing?
Yeah, about opportunity routing.
No, I think those are great examples.
Yeah. Okay, so we are almost up on time. I was looking to see if there's any questions. Lisa, keep us honest on that. I think what I'd love to do is, let's make sure we don't have any more slides. Next steps, talk to your CSM, explore the learning hub and get the things. So that's good to know. I'm going to show the learning hub, and then I'm also going to leave like a lightning round of like final thoughts, things that our lovely panelists here want to make sure they talk about before we release everyone. So I'm going to go here to our support site. And I just wanted to share a couple of things here because in my experience, routing was one of the hardest things for me to learn. So I've tried to organize the information in our routing category such that it's kind of a, we start with the 10,000 foot view and then kind of direct you into the articles that are going to get you the more like hands-on stuff. So if you're curious about routing, come to this section, understand, first of all, this like goes through the data model. I try to include images here so you can kind of understand what is the structure of this, the architecture that's here and how things work. And then once you're like, you know what, I want to try to do it. There's this get started page where you can see the high level overview of like, okay, we've got to plan the thing. We need to look at our territory plan and our coverage to kind of make sure we understand what that is, because that's so essential to how the policies are actually going to work. Yada, yada, yada. So this is kind of these 2 top level pages here at the routing policies top level category page, and this get started with routing page as well, kind of orient you and can help you dive into specific how-to articles to get more context on the actual configuration, as it were. So I will share links to this in the follow-up as well. Okay. Lightning round. Final thoughts on routing, team.
I'll share one more just, kind of anecdote about why it can be helpful to have these things in the same tool. We had a customer once who tried keeping their routing in a different tool from their territory structures. And every year when it came time to do cutover, not only did they have to spend a lot of hours recreating whatever work they did within Fullcast into their routing tool, but then they wanted to reroute every lead that existed in their Salesforce. And the amount of time that their other tool took to reroute, they had over 1 million leads, which was just crazy. But it took over a week for another tool versus just under 2 days for us. So not having different tools doesn't just save you time, but it also can or doesn't just save you time in the aspect of not having to redo work, but it can also save you time in the processing. When it's all in one system, the processing is happening a bit faster. So just a little anecdote that customer really appreciated once we moved over into all the routing in Fullcast.
Yeah, and separate from just the annual planning, it's unlocking the agility that you're absolutely going to need mid-year. There's always some crazy thing that you have to change, right? Maybe the EMEA strategic leader left and you have a new one and they've completely reorganized how they want things done. I don't think you want to do all of that rework in 2 systems, especially when Fullcast really makes it pretty easy in the first place. So
Tyler, 10 seconds to end on the bang.
Set it and forget it. The Ronco, and this is Lisa sent me this, Ronco Showtime Rotisserie. You can all look it up.
Oh,
it's great.
Definitely forgot that.
Up to good work. I actually remember the Showtimers history, and we actually had one of those. So I think that's a great final thought. I just want to say thank you to our engaged participant who's been sending us lovely messages throughout. Thank you so much. That makes it so much more fun. Like I said, we'll send out the recording and all the aftermath tomorrow. And thanks again for coming. Questions, always reach out to the team. Anybody here, your CSM, we're always happy to help. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.